Hey everyone, you're listening to the Active Turnkey podcast, a podcast designed for hands-off, passive real estate rental investors. In the Active Turnkey podcast, you'll hear Tom Olson and Jarrod Stoutmeister discuss all things turnkey rentals with other turnkey providers, service providers, and rental investors. Our goal is to help you reach your financial freedom and whatever comes after that. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Active Turnkey podcast. I'm your host, Jarrod Stoutmeister, and I have the Tom Olson here. And when I say welcome back, it's been a little while.
Yes, we have
recorded.
Somehow got off our rhythm, and we're going to get back on it though, guys. I promise. We're going to make it happen.
Yes, we're going to be recording like crazy, and we'll see how that goes, right?
We're going to do it.
No, it's going to be good, no doubt.
I mean, every one of our podcasts are really good.
Actually, we had a guy in here last week from out of state, and he actually found us through the podcast. Mm-hmm. That's how he found Olson Group, and he plans to invest here with us. And
I actually had somebody complain.
Oh, good.
About our podcast last week, Jarrod. But his complaint was that we hadn't done one last week. So, yeah,
it's valid.
Well, but he said that they're so. He actually used the words. I want to make sure that I'm not being dishonest here, but he used the words. I think he said that they're so full of value, and he missed it.
Man,
and he even thought that we were funny sometimes, Jarrod.
Well, now that we know that, it's going to be hard to.
I know. That's what I said. I was kind of nervous now getting on this next.
Yeah, now I feel like
podcast.
I really have to bring something.
Now we actually have to bring it,
or you need to bring more.
Because
I don't know if I bring value at all. Because I think maybe you.
Or maybe I just need to bring more. Or maybe I just need to bring it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're the game plan. So this is just riding on you then. At this point,
it's all on my shoulders.
Yes, it is.
Well, it's a good thing I've been doing push-ups this year. So if any of you have been following me, I don't think I've even mentioned this on the podcast, Jarrod. But this year, I had a goal at the very beginning of the year to do 25,000 push-ups this year, and I hit 18,000 on the dot this morning. So I'm on track. I think I'm going to make it. But like how we talk about goals. And I think goals are very, very important. I'm not sure we have actually talked about goals in the podcast, but I mean, I know my other podcasts we have and other podcasts, you probably hear that a lot. Like goals are really important. It's important to have a goal. It's important to know where you're going. But I think along the journey between the point wherever you are today and between where you want to get to, there are some important decisions that you have to make, and there's a lot of it's just who you work with, and what we're going to talk about today, I think, kind of goes along with kind of a filter to a certain degree that will help you make those decisions about how you get from wherever you are today to wherever you want to get to. So for example, I wanted to get to 25,000 push-ups, and one of my core values is community. So I said, you know what? I'd like to create a little mini community with this push-up. So I actually have 5 guys, and we check in every day.
I'm not one of them.
And he's not one. He didn't want to get in on the thing.
I'm almost too
He's already
ripped
too buff. Yeah, he's ripped, and he didn't want it.
I'm kind of embarrassed about it.
Yeah. So don't ask him to take his shirt off because it would embarrass all you. I
might just do it.
Yeah, and he might do it, so don't ask him that. But I thought, hey, this would be fun. So there's 5 guys of us, and honestly, none of them are around here. Most of them are from around the country, and actually, most of the guys are older than me, which I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh, wow, these 50, 60, 70-year-old. I think there's a guy that's almost 70 that's actually has done more than I have done in our group. And I thought to myself, wow, like these guys are really rocking it. One guy's already at like 40,000. He was doing like 400 a day for a period of time, and I'm like, dude, like just stop it. Like,
showing off.
Yeah, just I'm not doing that. Like, I want to get to my goal. This is what we're gonna do.
Get it.
But one of my core values is community, so I wanted to involve other people in that. But not only that, I knew I needed accountability. I knew I needed somebody that I could go to, and if I didn't post that day, that they were going to be asking, "Hey, let's go, guys. We got to get going." And there's been some months where there wasn't a ton of activity on it. I know this morning 3 of us checked in, and so for me, that's just an example of why. Or of how it'll help you get to your goals. And sometimes you want to get to your goals, and at the end of life, you want to make sure that you did it the right way. And I think that that's another reason why we come up with core values. So which is what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So Tom kind of let the cat out of the bag.
Oh, sorry, Jarrod.
He really did. Tom loves core values.
I do,
and so he could not hold himself back. And so he let us know right off the bat.
I almost did. I almost made it.
He was close and so far away.
Well, we're going to talk about it at some point today, right?
Yeah. So today's podcast, the next two. So today we're going to talk about why we need core values. Now, this is the Active Turnkey podcast. So you might be asking yourself, okay, what does this have to do with it? But I'm telling you, from a company standpoint, I didn't even realize till even recently how important it is. And Tom has said over the years that we hire and fire based upon core values. And so, just the whole operation of why you operate and having the right people on your team and being governed by something. And so today we're talking a little bit about why they're important, how you do it, different things like that. And then the next podcast, we'll talk about our specific core values because we thought it would be helpful for you to know, who we are. And in a sense, that is kind of who defines
and you might even get our core values out of us today in this podcast, sure. But like tomorrow, the next podcast we're going to go into more explanation and kind of deeper what they mean, because you could have a word on a wall, right?
Very much.
You go to a lot of different businesses and they have the words on the wall. It's funny to me almost, Jarrod, that almost every business I go into, I mean, almost every one of them, the word integrity is up there.
It's huge.
But at the end of the day, like, you find out that they don't do what they say they're going to do. And at the end of the day, like, there really is not really what you believe is integrity. So like and don't get me wrong, I believe integrity is absolutely important, but I believe it's more about like, how do you define that word or that core value or whatever you want to say it is. It's way more than that. And even deeper, trying to give examples of what it would mean. It's funny, like, so when you talk about the ultra wealthy, and almost every book that you talk about, when it comes to the ultra wealthy, you will find that there is a matriarch or patriarch that creates the wealth, right? And then the wealth gets transferred from generation 1 to generation 2. And everybody's so focused on making sure that the wealth is secured and that the wealth is properly transferred to the second generation. The problem is in most cases, how the person lived their life and how they actually got from their point A to point B as the patriarch or matriarch of that family who created the wealth, that doesn't ever get passed on. And it's never important enough to then even be thought about getting passed on to generation 3. So what do you find out? In most cases, super wealthy people, all their wealth is gone by generation 3. Generation 3 completely squanders it, and by the time they die, they're mostly like just, either normal people, or they haven't really, or maybe even worse, honestly, because a lot of times they've been spoiled through this whole time and they never learned how to work. They never learned, what all those things meant. And, so for me in business, it's not only important for me to do this in my business, but it's also important for me to just have my own personal core values and my own personal, in our family, we call them our family rules. For our kids, and we do and I actually do this with my kids. When we're in the car, I'll actually say, "Hey, how can we be kind today?" So one of our number one family rule is be ye kind, and we're like, "How can we do this? Give me an example of what you could do today that would mean be ye kind." One of our core values is no lying allowed. Tell the truth. Okay, how can we tell the truth today? What are some things that we can do, or what are some examples of situations that we may find ourselves in today that we need to make sure that we tell the truth? No whining is one of our family rules. I mean, and on the flip side of that is like, what are you thankful for? So if you're focused on what you're thankful for, chances are you're probably not going to be whining. So we'll ask everybody in the family, even mom and dad, will give an example of what does that mean. So that's kind of what we're going to get into tomorrow, more or less, about how we define our core values and what they mean to us. But I can just tell you, if you haven't done an exercise yourself, most people have done an exercise if they work in some kind of corporate environment, maybe to help understand this a little bit. But most people that are investing, or most people that are doing it, or like are buying turnkeys from us, or lending us money, or you're a part of real estate networks, you've never really done it as it pertains to those investments.
That's good.
And then thinking about it, like I was in a situation, literally like right now, I'm in a situation with two brothers that were given a big piece of property. And the two brothers like were never even given instructions about the money or about the wealth or about the land, let alone be given core values of how we should treat each other when it comes to this circumstance. And really, like, I don't see any good happening from this. And honestly, like the one person's made an offer to buy the other one, and they're probably offering maybe 60% of what it's worth. And then the other party's coming back with this is what they think their half is worth, which is probably really what market value says. And at the end of the day, like what really should have happened is at some point a parent should have seen this. And the only way you can see it is if you stop and you plan and you like think. Sometimes thinking is the hardest thing we could do, which is why very few people do it, which is, I think Henry Ford said that or something. But so sometimes I think the hardest job is actually thinking, coming up with these. And, we're going to also kind of give you a little bit of how you can do that. I actually do implement business operating systems for businesses, and I can, and I've done this with other businesses, and I'm just going to kind of go through how you would do this with you, maybe you and your wife, maybe you and the group of people that you're investing with, or maybe it's a business, or maybe it's a family. I think they apply all around.
It's good. No, that's really good stuff. I think even before that, you can just be aware of what other people do. So, I mean, you mentioned family. So like one way, I mean, you could incorporate something you're learning in your families by seeing what somebody else does or what they don't do. And it's interesting. You talked about having core values, and then do you operate by them? And so you really want to, before you get going, you stay aware, and then you start choosing them. I think in many cases we do have a pie in the sky dream scenario, but these are not always easy to actually. So like there's a book called Walk the Talk or Walk the Walk. And in the book, he talks about specific companies that choose core values along this line. But when trouble comes, they show which ones were important to them or what was more important than the core value. In many cases, it's profits or something like that. And so in the case today, he gave live illustrations of, well, in this case, this happened. So to them, money was more important. And to this situation, this was important. And it's really interesting when stuff happens, which it will. This is supposed to stabilize you or be a foundation or center in a sense, and that you're governed by. And in many cases, your true center shines through when you let it. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and you bring up like so many good points. I probably would forget them all that I kind of thought through as you're talking there. But one of the most important things when you're coming up with core values is to really be honest about it. Yeah. Because if your number one goal is profit, if your number one goal is how much money can you make, then you probably don't want to work with certain people because like for us, I'll be honest with you, if that's your number one goal, don't get me wrong, I want to make as much money as I possibly can for our owners. I mean, I feel like stewardship is one of ours, and we want that to be the case. We want to make, but at the end of the day, so is community. I care about my tenants. I want to make sure that they are also living in a safe and nice place. And at the end, I also have charity as part of my, now not that I'm going to ever give away, my owners' profits, but like there's a whole part of why we do what we do that kind of all blends together. And so it's important to be very honest with yourself and be okay with whoever you are. Now, it might be the case where you said pie in the sky. I kind of thought maybe you're not where you want to be, and maybe you do want to make these your goals, and you kind of just have to keep reminding yourself about, hey, just don't, I can't forget, yes, this is my goal to be, multi-millionaire maybe. And yes, this is my goal, but how I get there, does it matter to you or not? Like, do I want to step over people? Do I want to like squash other people? And to me, like, I don't, like, to me, that's not who I am. And that's not who I want my companies to be. Will there be people that work for us at times that maybe don't fit all of them? Sure. Probably not, but that's probably yes. But like, it is our goal, and it's my goal to weed that out. Will there be times that you, as the owner, don't always operate on those core values? Probably. But I think the goal should always, these are kind of like measuring sticks. These are kind of like standards that you're setting for yourself. You say, this is what I would most like to withhold, and this is what I'm going to hire by, that I'm going to fire by, I'm going to reward by, I'm going to, maybe punish or whatever, however you want to, word that, by. So, and that's what we want. One of our core values is growth. So a good example of that is like we have a weekly, at all times, I should say weekly, we do bi-weekly or monthly city hall meetings, and we as a company are reading a book. I want to see as an owner who's reading the book. To me, it proves who's reading the book by who can raise their hand and say, this is what I got out of it. And it's exciting to me at the end of the year when I go and I write down who I think, won the core value awards. Like that's one of the things I'm looking at. Are you involved? Are you giving shout outs to other people, or are you just hoping that everybody else is going to give you shout outs? To me, that's kind of community. Like, do I really want other people? And then, how do you handle the little things? How do you make sure that you're focused not on just what your job is and how you can do what your job is, but how do I handle these little things for other people? And so anyways, like I'm getting into the weeds too much and probably into tomorrow's podcast, next week's podcast about it a little bit, but I just want to make sure I emphasize how important they really are. Yeah. So, and the reason why they're important is because at the end of the day, you don't want to be working with people that are not on the same page with you. Sure. And there's no way to be on the same page with you unless you have these core beliefs and these core. And honestly, like what we found is that you'll be so much better off working with people that have your same core values that maybe aren't as skilled, and maybe because if they're not as skilled, they'll change their skills if they're on the same page with you. If they have the same goals, they want to go to the same direction as you are, and they want to get there the same way. If not, you're just gonna be constantly fighting. And at the end of the day, like if somebody's fighting you for you to help you reach your goals, then it's really a lose-lose situation, because both people are going to lose in that situation.
Yeah, that's really good. I think it's a good foundation for where we're looking to go today. So first of all, why? Why should somebody do that? We kind of touched on it right now a little briefly, but if when we started our company, or you started the company, the Olson Group companies, you created the Olson Group company core values and mission statement. We actually did the mission statement together, but the core values you created. Why was that important to you? Why should someone do it? And because you mentioned you should do it across the way, you kind of touched on it, but nitty gritty, why should someone do that?
Well, again, I think it's just because you need to have those goals. You need to have they're kind of like standards. These are the standards that are the most important. Now, does that mean that just because it's not one of our core values, that something else that is important is not important? Sure. No. I mean, for instance, one of our core values is not, honesty. But does that mean that if somebody lies to me, that they're still not going to be fired? Or to me, it's almost like, there's some core values that I kind of believe are almost assumed in wrapped up into some other one, another one of our core values. Yep. But I think it's kind of you have to raise the flag. You have to raise that standard and say, this is what we want. This is who we want. And as an owner, it's much easier to be able to go out and repeat it over and over and over again if you've established it. Does that make sense? So establishing the core values is the first step of this whole thing, and we are going to get to a little bit on how to do it today. But I just cannot stress enough how important they are to actually have them, and not just have them, but know what they mean, and then almost even give examples that you can give to other people to be able to say, this is what I'm talking about. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, if you don't know how to get on the same page as somebody else, then you're never going to be able to reach your goals the way you want to reach your goals. And on the flip side, if you never get on the same page with the people that you're working with, chances are you're probably not going to reach your goals. Yeah. Or maybe you're going to reach your goals, but you're not really going to hit them the way that you want to. And at the end of the day, I want to be able to sit my head on my pillow every night and be able to know I did the right thing, and I did what I thought for me, number one, what God would want me to do. And, number two, I know I felt like I did the best thing. Whether or not somebody else thought I did or not, I want to know that I feel like I did the right thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. So by writing them down and having them as the center, what you build around, and it is, first of all, it's something that's in front of you, but also I think by having it written down, by having it front and center, I think you become more aware of those things in others. You can identify them more clearly because they are written down, as opposed to liking something or noticing something about them in general. You now have a way to filter your relationships too, based upon that. So I think that's pretty interesting. And so let's get into how. How does someone do it? We talked about how important it is. How does somebody go about doing this? Some people may just not know the first place to start. So how do you start? Start going. So let's make it more specific. When you created the core values for Olson Group, and we can even go through them. Charity, stewardship, community growth. When you created those, what was your goal? How did you go about doing it? What kind of tips can you give for people so at least give them a starting point?
So I think there's two main ways to create core values. Okay, so let's just start there. And I've even been trained by implementers, and I've been trained two different ways even. So the first guy that trained me on core values basically did it in the group setting for a business. Okay, so in a group setting in a business, let's just say you're starting a business, or maybe it's just you and your wife. I don't know, but maybe let's just say you're starting a business, and you have your key group or your leadership team. That those 3, 5, 7 people that are the people that you want to go running after battle with. You know what I'm saying? These are the guys that you think have your back. And then, so kind of a first question that you could ask is, okay, name 3 people in our business that we think embody the people that we want in our business. And you don't do anything else. You just start with that first question first. So you might say, this person, Tom, of course, Jarrod, of course, right? And maybe you say Chrisney, the people that work for us. Let's just say that we use those three people. And then you'd say, okay, let's go around the room, and then we are going to write down, 5 to 10 attributes about that particular person that would best describe that person. So 5 or 10 maybe one-word statements. Or, it's even funny because I've even seen core values, Jarrod, that actually have a person's name in it in the business. And for instance, my dentist friend up in Michigan, one of their core values is Danish. And the guy's name is Dan because he was one of the guys that was picked in this type of, creating because they want people to be like him. It was like they just wanted people to be like that person. So you're gonna have up on this board or up on this wall maybe 30, 40, different words or attributes that you would say these are things. This is how I would describe these people by giving you a one-word thing, and then from there you kind of do an exercise that we call keep, killing, combined. So you will first of all you'll combine first. So sometimes you'll have 2 different ones that maybe it's the exact same word, sure. Or maybe it's 2 different words that kind of mean the same thing, and you're like, okay, well, I think these 2 things mean the same thing. Let's combine those 2, and then from there you'll kind of really decide, okay, which ones do we really not want to put up here? We'll kill some of these. We'll just get rid of them, and eventually you'll probably end up with a list of maybe 15 to 20. Maybe you start with 30 to 40. Now you're at 15 to 20, and then it kind of comes time to voting and then almost from that point you can even start defining them and start saying, well, what does this really mean? Why would we choose that one over this one? And then at the end of the day, what most implementers will say is that you want to come up with 3 to 5. Now, I know I've seen some walls of 15 core values that people have. I think some of them are just more statements than they are anything else. I've even come up with a whole list of these are the type of employees I want to have. And there's probably 20 or 30 different things and statements that I've said about these are the types of people that I want working for me. The core values roll into that, but that's not the same thing as a core value. The core values these are the ones that I'm going to prioritize over the other ones. And then this is, now you can get to those 15 different things almost by defining each one. So then what you'll do in this same exercise is that you will then like at least put what we call we believe statements. So for instance, for charity for us, we say we believe charity is more than giving, it's a way of living. So it's not just about giving money, it's about how we live our life. So putting these we believe statements is kind of like this next step to that. And then the final step of creating core values is to create scenarios. But this is what it means. If you do this, then this means you have this core value. And then what's probably the easiest to explain and the easiest to kind of really show for is what are your non-negotiables when it comes to that. So for instance, one of our core values is community. And so for us, we actually even state in our core value statement, so that means if you are a lone wolf, you're probably not going to fit in here. So that's kind of a non-negotiable. Like you have to be able to interact with other people in order to work in a business atmosphere. So at the end of the day, like that's one way to do it. And then I think the other way to do it is the similar. But sometimes it will start with the visionary. So instead of having it as a group setting and having it as like, well, these are the people that I want to have, a lot of times the visionary will have a sense of where he really wants things to go. What is he? Because really the visionary of a company, and if you're the visionary of your investments, like you have to understand you are a visionary of a company. The company is this investment company that you own. And so the visionary might have his own thoughts of this is what I want, when it comes to this. And, I kind of I've done it both ways. I don't think Jarrod, you were not a part of the way we did it with the other one. But then when we moved everything to this company, I kind of just came, and our company had already had core values, and we kind of changed them at that point in time. And I think that's important. Sometimes they do need to be readdressed. And you might have come up with something in your 20s that now in your 50s and 60s you look back and think maybe I was foolish. Or what you might do is you might have one really strong core value and you've just renamed it 3 times. I've seen that a lot. I really have. I've seen people that have really 1 or 2 core values and they just renamed them within their core values. I'm like, okay, well, every single one of these examples is an example of that, particular thing. I've seen like integrity renamed like 6 times, and people's core values that have 8 core values, and I'm like, you really only have 3, right? Because these are all integrity, right? So a visionary sometimes will say, you know what, I really want to have something. Like I want this to be specific. And I wasn't even that way. I didn't even have a super strong opinion. I went back into myself and thought one day and said, you know what, I think this would be a really good, and I was kind of, to me, it was almost important to have words that I felt meant they were deeper words. So you asked me kind of how I came up with mine. And to me, like, I could have said love, I could have said giving, I could have said all those other words that kind of roll up into charity, but I was like, you know what? I want charity. And then same thing with stewardship. I felt like, yes, I want to be good to my owners. Yes, I want to be good to my lenders. Yes, I want to be even good to my communities. But like, I felt the word stewardship was really what I wanted to see embodied. Does that make sense? And then, for me, like I enjoy people, and I want to make sure it's always win-win for everybody. I want to make sure that we're helping not only the community that we're in, as far as our housing is concerned, but I wanted to make sure that community for me is more about the people that you're working with and the people that you're working for. And all of that. So all of that is kind of embodied in community. And depending on what kind of business you have, maybe you don't need to have community or something to that effect in your core values. But for us, I kind of felt like it was needed. So you asked me, how did you come up with yours? Well, those are our 4 core values: charity, stewardship, community, growth. And I felt like they hit 4 different points to a certain degree. You know what I mean? Charity is more about how you're living. It's more about your life and kind of like the purpose. So purpose was important to me to kind of get into my core values. It was like, what do we really want? To me, that's my big goals are to flip the city of Gary, which is kind of community, and to give away $1 billion in my lifetime, which is charities. Like it was very important for me to have my purpose into my core values in a certain way.
Sure.
But that's why stewardship is our second core value. Like I didn't want to do it the wrong way. I wanted to make sure that, I was taking care of the little things. I wanted to make sure that there was like a how are we going to do this? So this almost like charity for me is almost like the big goal. The stewardship is kind of like how we're going to do it. And then community is who I was going to do it with. And then growth was like, well, how I'm going to get there. You know what I'm saying? So for me, they're 4 different things. They're not just like one thing that I renamed 4 different times. It's 4 different, to me, growth is almost like discipline. You know what I mean? Like if I wanted to do 25 push-ups this year, I'm not just going to sit down one day and do 25,000 push-ups. Like it's going to take the constant discipline, so growth for us is like, are you showing up to meetings? Growth for us, are you showing up to your daily huddles? Are you, the daily huddles are the discipline that creates the growth. It's the push-ups is the discipline that creates the growth. Eating right is the discipline that, creates the growth. So that's kind of how I came up with ours, and I wanted them to be different. And I also to me, it was important of what words I used. And most people that listen to this podcast know I'm a Christian, and I wanted them also to have some kind of meaning that I kind of felt like I could go back to Scripture and also kind of make sure that I'm doing things right. Because at the end of the day, we don't just have a core value, but we also have what we call our core focus, which is to glorify God by adding value to our communities. Right. And, so for us, like I wanted to make sure they all kind of came together at some point and they all supported that goal.
Yeah. No, it's really good. I as you were starting off, my initial thought was, have you seen or heard from other implementers of people who set goals when the visionary himself doesn't hit some of those core values? So like, frankly...
Is this a trick question, Jarrod?
No, I'm not trying to get you or anything, but you get what I'm saying? Like you have, it kind of goes back into the pie in the sky. Now my...
So what you're saying is, have you seen people that maybe have implemented them as a team, but they weren't really the same core values as the owner?
Well...
Because the owner didn't actually hit those core values.
Well, I was thinking even the owner himself being part of the selection of the core values, where again, it kind of maybe it goes into the pie in the sky idea of what you wanted, but like it just wasn't part of them. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think that's a dangerous thing, which I think is probably partly the reason why the other way I was taught was, okay, it really needs to come from the visionary, because they're trying to diffuse that. Now, whether or not, that's always a right thing or not, maybe just, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of visionaries I see just aren't always good people. Like they really don't like live up to what they say that they want. And, that's why it's important. It's always been important for me to have people on my team that I feel like I can at least go to, and as a person, not necessarily as a position in my job, but as a person to person, and say, hey, like, tell me if I'm thinking wrong about this. I mean, most of my conversations with my leadership team is me bringing something to them saying like, am I thinking about this wrong? Sure. Or like, and if I am, please tell me, call me out. Like, please tell me that I'm not thinking right about this. But if I am thinking right about this, then like a lot of times, I might see something. I'm like, well, that means that this in our business is not fitting with our core values. Right. I have a situation right now that I can think of. I'm not going to talk about it on the air right now, but I was going to talk to Jarrod about it, where I feel like there's something going on.
I'm in trouble, is what he's saying.
That there's something going on. Jarrod's not in trouble. There's something going on that I'm like, I don't think that embodies this core value. And if I'm wrong, tell me, please tell me. But so to me, I think the core values are there to not only hold the employees accountable for a business perspective, but also the owner. Right. But then also, like, we talk about hiring and firing and rewarding and, punishing on all these as well. But also, like, I even try. I think the least amount of focus I can have on this is with tenants, but even I would wish, my hope, my goal, my dream would be that even my tenants would embody these. But especially my contractors, my vendors, my investors. I mean, there's been investors that we've sent disengagement letters to because we're just like, I'm sorry, what you're asking me to do does not fit with our core values, and I will not do that. I don't think it's right, and I won't do it. You know what I'm saying? So, like I want my owners to have the same core value. And I know that there's enough people out there that embody these core values that really do want to help the community, that really do care to make sure that the tenants have a safe place to live, and that really do want to make sure that at the end of the day, they can put their head on their pillow at night knowing that they did the right thing. And are they trying to make money? Absolutely. Like that's why we do what we do. I mean, at the end of the day, we are here to be profitable. We're here for you to be profitable, for us to be profitable. But I want to make sure I do it the right way, and I want to make sure that everybody at the table gets their little opinion validated and gets their and then we're considering everybody's points as much as we possibly can. So
that's really good. So in the day-to-day, I on Fridays I host investors, and just this morning I had a first-time call with a couple guys who are interested in investing here, and normally I because of Gary. So if you talk to people, most people outside of Gary really don't know what's happening in Gary, and they don't know what the makeup is in Gary. They just more or less regurgitate what they've read, just whatever. And so what I find interesting is normally the way I ask people is, do you think that the area dictates the type of tenant you're getting? And in most cases, I shouldn't say most, but in many cases they say yes, it does. So ultimately that means a D+ area gets you a D+ tenant. And so I went into the mindset there, and I think they're right, but they're only right when that's what the tenant's given. So in many cases in Gary, what's happened is you have a lot of investors who want to do the very least they can to the property to make it livable. And they've been that way for many years. So my counter to that is, well, what do you expect to get as a tenant? So, and really, so for us,
it's like a vicious circle.
Exactly.
It's a vicious circle because, now what you can't do is just raise the standard of a house and then not raise the standard of how you vet your tenants. You know what I mean? Like, but if you raise your standard of your house, like it's a vicious circle, because now instead of getting 1 or 2 or 3 maybe applications, you're going to have 20 or 30 that we get to choose from, and chances are you're going to get a much better tenant when you have 20 or 30 than if you have 1 or 2.
Yeah, and even in management, so you talk about fairness. So I think we want our tenant. We want to have a good quality tenant who's not a problem, right? You don't like having a problem tenant where there's just always issues and collections, whatever. But in many cases, they want to have a fair property manager where if there's a problem, they're going to deal with it. And so there's this give and take where in many cases we want what we're not willing to give. And so I think it's really interesting. And I actually think that in many cases we do have a tenant pool, or our current tenants do in many cases live out our core values, whether they realize it or not, based upon those
part of
types
it's
things.
Because of the standards that we set up, even in their application. Like we are, and we can get into a whole nother podcast on this, but like we are framing them by the application. So I want to see, do they fit in this thing or not? I'm framing them up by just the questions we ask. I want to see how they're answering them. Jeffrey Taylor, Mr. Landlord even teaches on this. If they're going to be a problem with you, if they can't even answer a question from you up front, how do you think they're going to be when it comes to pay rent? When they lost their job or something to that effect.
They can follow directions on how to do something. How are they going to go into Buildium and do all these different things? And
are every single person that we get in their perfect tenants? No, but I feel like the chances are better. Like statistically, you're going to find out that it's much better if you're at least showing the standard. Same thing with business. If you're just at least showing the standard, like for us, we review these every quarter. Every quarter we get up, and then even at the end of the year, we're rewarding. Like somebody gets a big trophy at the end of the year in our company, huge. That kind of gives that core value, and it's voted on by the employees. It's not just voted on by us. So if there's ways that you can implement that in your businesses, great. If not, if it's just you and your wife, fine. That's if you're just writing these down, so you want to know who you're working with and you want to make sure that you kind of fit. I think it's vitally important. And then what Jarrod said at the beginning, writing them down, I think is also very important, and letting other people see the written word of yours. It's kind of like it kind of is what holds you accountable. That's part of how we can help hold you accountable, because when you go out and seek other people, and you say these are my core values, and then when a repair comes and you don't really want to make it, but you said that hey, you wanted to make sure that you know what I'm saying. And am I saying every single repair always needs to be done? Absolutely not. But there are times where things should be done, and it would.
Do I want to? No.
Yes.
Should it be done? Yes. Okay.
That's the problem.
There's the decision. Yeah, it's really good.
Does it fit my core values? Is it good? Is it going to hurt my core values if I don't make this decision? I think it's something we can go back to, and we can help filter. It really helps us filter our decisions, because it helps prioritize how we're thinking and why are we thinking that way.
Yeah. So this podcast, again, we wanted to give you a little bit more insight about just, how you can operate, but also how we do too. And so this next podcast we're going to record is going to be discussing our specific core values, why we chose them, how we interpret them, and then how we put them into action. So we hope this podcast brought you value. Just don't forget, we do build rental portfolios for investors. So while we do want to bring value in this podcast in general, we do also build rental portfolios. So if you're interested in getting started building a portfolio, or you're interested in you want to add another market to your portfolio, you can reach out to us. You can go to buyolsongroup.com, or you can reach me. My email is Jarrod@buyolsongroup, and we'd be very happy to have you join us.
If this has brought value to you, I would love for you to tell your friends about us. We've gotten a lot of extra listeners because of just you. Yeah. And I want to let you guys know that we really do appreciate that. If you guys would go on to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review, we don't have as many of those as we would really like to have. And you would do us a huge favor if you just go on there, click 5 stars, and tell everybody how funny Jarrod is. And how smart Tom is. It would be a blessing, right, Jarrod?
I know I would appreciate it.
Okay,
that would help
so
me
Jarrod wants you to tell him how funny he is. I do want it. This is probably the last podcast that we're going to mention this, but we do have an event coming up October 8th through the 10th. It's going to be right here. We have an actual auditorium right outside our little studio here that seats about 100 people. And I think as of right now, we already have 80 people signed up. It's going to be fun. It's going to kick everything off on the 8th with just touring the office. So Jarrod said a lot of people come to our office just to tour our office. But at noon that day, we're going to let people tour the office. We're going to check in at 2 o'clock. And from 4 to 8, we're going to have live music. We're going to have food trucks. It is going to be a blast. It'll be the best real estate free-for-all networking event of the year. And I've named it that. So I can name it that. The best real estate networking event of the year. We're going to have a ton of fun. Great speakers from around the country are going to be here on the 9th and 10th. And if you're interested in that, you guys can check us out at goodsuccess.com, and you can sign up right there, and we'll get you invited to the private Facebook group and get all the extra details for you right there.
Well, I appreciate you for joining us. Thank you so much. Active Turnkey.
The best way to buy rentals.
See you guys.
Olson Group Network makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, Olson Group Network does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Any third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions, standards, or policies of Olson Group Network. Olson Group Network assumes no responsibility or liability for the accuracy or completeness of the content contained in third-party materials or on third-party sites referenced in this podcast, or the compliance with the applicable laws of such materials and/or links referenced herein.